These bushes are actually made from zombie heads. And here's a goat head trophy made using an actual goat. And here are 83 build hacks that you can use to transform your world, starting with these fruit trees. By taking the resin that you get from the Pale Garden, you can overlay it on top of the leaves of a regular oak tree, and it'll combine with the texture to make it look like you're placing orange trees along your grove. They'll just be orange trees that drop apples. Or if you want to stick to the Pale Garden and instead upgrade the trees that we have over there, then we can take after this advice from Average Tuna and use different kinds of tough blocks mixed in with the willow trees to get the perfect kind of tree carcass to overlay all of the pale moss and creeping vines off of. And honestly, I just love the way that this all shapes together. And by going overboard with the creeping vines and hanging branches, you can really get something cool looking. Or maybe you want a tree that's entirely unique. Well, you could always try something like this. Since, taken after the example of mine designs, we could always lay together different cubic trees like so. And I think the mix of moss, lime concrete, and lime wool here, the different cubes of leaves, it really blends together nicely. And then I've never seen granite used for the stem of a tree before, but seeing it here, it definitely fits. It just might fit better as something that you'd get from O'Hare Air in the Lorax. Did you know resin can be waterlogged? Yeah, I was shocked too. But if we were to take that and actually put it into the bottom of our fountain, then it gives us the perfect detail to have coins that were tossed out into the wishing well. I just hope you wish for something better than the creaking, since you're gonna need a lot of them to get enough of this resin. If we were to pack together our resin into blocks, then we could mix it together with magma blocks and shroom lights like so to get the perfect palette for walking around on hot coals. And they mix in perfectly with the red hot magma blocks, but they're completely safe to walk across. I also just love the sounds the shroom lights make when you place them. In the past, people have shown off a build hack to mix together our honey blocks with raw gold ore into the ground to make it look like honey's dripping from the beehive, which, don't get me wrong, that works, but I actually like how resin works even better, mostly because we can place it along anything, and not just at the top of the other blocks in the forest, but also along the bark of the tree, making it look like it's accurately dripping down. And speaking of placing our resin against anything, I mean anything. Since if we were to take a warp block and place it on top of an end rod like so, then you'll notice that in our nether diorama like this, it comes together to make a perfect version of an in-between stage for the mini warped mushroom. And as soon as I bone meal up this one to full size, we can now appreciate the awkward teenage phase right here in the middle. Just don't ask it to clean up its room. When you're designing your next campfire, you should know that by mixing together different things of resin and gilded blackstone into the coals like so, we can make it look like hot embers that are coming off the fire. And then for an added touch, you could use the leaf litter like so for the brown texture to look like different parts of kindling, or if you switch over the biome type to a Pale Garden, then that leaf litter turns gray, giving us clumps of ash that came off of the flames. If you got access to a debug stick, then you should try this with your resin, since by placing one of these down and then punching it to switch over to a different facing side, and then activating it on each sides of the block, when you have a 6-sided resin, it looks like autumn leaves. And then using something like the world edit commands to copy this over, you can see as I paste into place all of these different resin leaves, giving us a full autumn tree. And then if you place a few more resin clumps down on the ground below, then we've got fallen leaves from our fall tree. With the recent addition to the new bush item that we have, you'll notice it shares a striking resemblance to the dead bubble coral, which if we place that on top of pale moss and our regular bush on top of green moss, that gives us a way to show the Pale Garden expertly weaving in with our regular forest. So if you want to add a little bit of storytelling to your build, this is a simple way to do it. If you place down a pale moss carpet and then right click it like so with a debug stick, then that'll extend all of the sides up at once, giving us our own version of pale grass, which is a great way to decorate all the builds that we're going to show you. Such as, once you've built a window like so, what you could do is you could take the pale oak doors that you have, place them on either side of the glass, and then flip them open in such a way so that it looks like they're hinging perfectly as shutters for the window. Now, the way that you place these down does have to be a little bit precise. You should start angling your way into it, and then when you place it, it'll rotate out the proper way. But once you do, the results are hard to argue with. So what we're going to do is we're going to place one armor stand facing this way, another the other direction, and then by using a piston or force place an axiom, we can put a smoker into place at their feet, and then lay on top our pale trap doors, and then decorate it in a number of different ways. We could just place down a pale trap door fence, and then flip it open to give ourselves a smaller armchair that isn't going to break. Or you could place down this pale moss carpet right on here, which I think has to be my favorite. It creeps up the back and it looks really integrated into the seat. Or you could place down a pressure plate and 2 signs along the side. Just make sure no one sits on it. That'll break the signs. Much in the same way that we made that fake pale grass, we're going to be doing the same with glow lichen, but not for grass, but instead for glass. Since if we were to place down a glow lichen like so in the middle of our glass blocks, then we can right click it with the debug stick and make it into a full glow lichen block that looks a lot like broken glass, which could be a cool way to decorate your builds or test out the broken windows theory. You probably don't think of using flowering azaleas in your floor, but I'm going to show you why you need to. Since if we were to take these and then mix them into our path like so next to to mossy cobblestone, then you can see that it integrates really well into looking like an extra overgrown version of the regular cobblestone path. And not just that, since if you want an extra build hack, what you could always do is add in slabs around the outside of these azalea bushes, and because that covers up the whole stem of the bush, it just makes it look like a grass half slab, which works out great when Mojang seems to refuse to give us any of those to play around with anyway. You want to know a creepy secret about this build hack? Here, I'll show you. So if we place down these giant pots and then facing zombie heads facing back towards the wall, while we know that it's a disembodied monster, when you look at it from the front, or rather the back of the head, it works perfectly as a bush design. And as we're pointing out, you can see that this actually looks like a jumbo version of when you place a cactus inside of a mini flower pot. And considering we can't place anything growing out of our regular pots like so, I'll take this as a good workaround. The old growth forests in Minecraft need a little bit of extra love. So to do that, what we can do is take together these mud brick slabs as well as packed mud, and then by laying it out in such a way along the trunk, we get these perfect huge shelf mushrooms growing off of the bark. And considering these mushrooms already tend to grow around the forest as is, I think it comes together really nicely. Unfortunately, with the Pale Garden, we didn't get any pale pumpkins as well, which seems like a total missed opportunity for a spooky update. So to add in some of our own, we can follow after this example by taking a white banner and then adding the different patterns on top in this order: black chief, white cross, white chief indented, white border, black thing, and then white perfez inverted. Which I will say that does make this a bit tough to get in survival, considering that to get the thing banner pattern, you need to use an enchanted golden apple. But hey, you only have to do it once if you do it right, and the ancient cities make it a lot easier to get those. And then with a green candle or a sea pickle on top, we've got the perfect stem for our new pale pumpkin. After you built yourself a palm tree, if you were to take decorated pots and then place them along the leaves, the top of the pot will disappear and we get these great looking coconuts to hang underneath the leaves. And if you take some of the smaller flower pots and place them along the leaves as well, from certain angles it will just look like a budding coconut for us to see. And I think that's just great. Once you place down a floor of snow, then we can take a little bit of leaf litter and add it on top like so to give ourselves muddy footprints tracking through the snow. And I already love this build hack. We've shown off something similar using stake and invisible item frames, but the fact that this is actually something that's survival friendly makes it so much better. Using leaf litter, we can make particularly intricate carpet designs. Now, the thing that you'll want to know to make this design is that leaf litter always places, depending on where you're facing, from the lower right corner and then moves counterclockwise. So you will have to turn yourself all around to get this kind of design, but once you figure it out, you can batch a whole bunch of them in a row and you get something that looks really cool out of it too. And then by switching over into different biome types, the leaf litter colors will change as well, meaning we could potentially have a gray carpet fringe as well. In Bedrock Edition, the leaves will change color with the snow, but the same doesn't have it in Java. But to make pretend that it does, we could use the pale oak leaves to make leaves that look tinted pale by the snow. And then by adding on different snow layers on top, I think we can really sell this illusion. I mean, it's better than just the spruce trees covered with snow that we're used to. I love the firefly bushes for the particles, but I don't love the sounds. So the way that we can go about using one of these is that by placing the firefly bush underneath the ground like so on a mud block, you'll notice that its particles do come through the roof, but the sounds will be left down there in the basement, which works out great if you want to place down a whole bunch of these, but you don't want it to sound like you placed down a whole bunch of them. And because they're in darkness under there in the basement, they're also going to be active at all hours, as opposed to just waiting until night. And using that trick with our hidden firefly bushes, we could do the same with our golden stack here, and instead of being fireflies, to instead turn into the shines and glimmers that come off of our golden stacks. Which, if you're gonna have a treasure room, you should go all out. I think this fits right in. Dried grass doesn't sound like something you want to be growing on your farm, but I'm gonna show you why you should add it in. Since by placing down a mix of the tall and small dried grass variants, then when we bone meal up the wheat fields, it'll come together and look like varied heights of the yellow fully grown wheat plant. So if you want a little bit of variety to your amber waves of grain, this stops it from looking just as boring as it would have normally. This surprised me, but you can actually place cactus flowers not on top of cactus, and instead by placing it on top of a waterlogged block like a trap door or a glass pane in this example, then the cactus flowers start to look like lily pad lotuses. And I particularly love this case of placing down a green glass stained pane that's waterlogged down there, looking like a stem that's coming up and giving us a river rose. By adding waterlogged barriers to your lake, then you can make it look like leaves and debris have started to build up on the surface. And especially having this underneath some kind of autumn tree, I think that would be really neat. Alright, so how do we build this lamp? Because normally you shouldn't be able to place a carpet block unsupported, and the same is true about our lanterns. But the way that we do this is possible, it's just a little weird. So what you would do first is you would place down a support block, then use something like glow lichen to then place the carpet on top of. Just make sure you're pointing at something that isn't the glow lichen so it doesn't replace it. And then when I add glow lichen underneath this, the carpet now can support itself, which then lets me replace that glow lichen that was underneath it, and there we go. It's a little complicated, but it is survival friendly. Using a mix of underscores and slashes, we can mix that all together to give ourselves a sign for our fire exit. And then by adding in glow ink and a red dye, you can make sure it stands out in case of emergency. And we'll make sure to have the thing to copy and paste in the description so that it's easy to replicate in your world. Iron bars are usually a means to an end, but here, we're going to show you how they can be a cool detail in and of themselves. Since by hanging a chain from the roof like so, and then placing down an iron bar underneath that, when it's not connecting to anything else, it'll look like a wind chime to blow around in the breeze. And you can vary the height of them to give yourself a little bit more of a decoration variety. By taking a black banner and then adding in a yellow border indented, a yellow inverted chevron, yellow perfez inverted, black chevron, yellow base, and yellow chief, then we've got the perfect warning label to lay on top of our radioactive barrels. And while that alone looks great when you place it on top of some yellow concrete, I will say that if you topple one over like so, then we can mix in some lime wool as well as different things as slime blocks to give ourselves the radioactive sludge that's oozing out. Whenever a player gets close to a vault, it'll open up and make a loud noise, which that alone would be great, but the fact that it sucks in particles means we can take after this example and add one to the roof of our build to give ourselves the perfect air conditioner machine. And by adding in a gray banner at the front like this user did, then you can even hide away the items that they're showing inside. And worth noting is that you could technically do this in survival, you just have to completely remove the inside of a trial chamber to make it happen. It's crazy, but not impossible. Here's how to make a working doorbell for your build. It's gonna take a little bit of redstone, but don't worry, it's not that difficult. So once we start with a redstone dust underneath where your button's gonna be, then we can pull out that signal with a repeater down into the floorboards, and then reroute it towards these two sets of note blocks. Now, importantly, you're gonna wanna make sure these note blocks are on top of gold blocks, since that'll help it make the right chime. And then by tuning this one 10 times and the other one 6, with a max delay repeater in between them, then when we press the button, we get this chime that you can hear right here. Reddit user Theo tries is a master builder, so it's no surprise that they know exactly how to make a go-kart using these heavy cores. It's a bit expensive here in survival, but check this out. Since what we do is we place down our 4 heavy cores like so, and then using a summon command to get our minecart into place, that alone gives us the perfect go-kart to have. But then by adding in an upside down armor stand like so, like they do in the original post, it starts to look like the steering wheel so we can drive this thing around, you know, hypothetically. And a great place to drive around that go-kart would be on this new road design. Since if we were to take the pale logs that we're getting from the Pale Garden, as well as these different creaking hearts and mix them into our road, then when you align the wood grain just correctly, keeping it all in a row like so, that'll illuminate the creaking heart and give us a way to have these perfectly illuminated lines on the middle of your road. But be warned, because perfectly illuminated does mean that you're also going to get some new passerbys walking around this road. I guess it wouldn't be fun to drive if there weren't a few pedestrians to look out for. Or, if you don't want that kind of hassle, then what you could always do is when you turn off the creaking hearts by mixing together the wood grain in the other way, then that unilluminated option goes from road design to tire tracks, which I think just looks really cool, especially when we use it with this car design. By using a thing of black concrete powder for the wheels, then we can mix in a couple of different things as slabs and stairs to give ourselves the chassis for our new car. And I will say, the way that I'm explaining this is maybe oversimplifying it, but I think the great thing about this kind of design is that you could freestyle with it depending on the kind of car that you want. But what I would say for a rule of thumb is that you want to make sure that you're getting this kind of arch shape around your tires to make it look like they can actually spin. And then if you connect them with the chain in between, that gives us our axle. We can add in a couple of iron trap doors for the fender, and then by mixing together polished black stone stairs, as well as smooth quartz stairs for the top, that'll start to look like tinted windows that outline the cabin of the car. And I like how they place down snow layers on top here, so that we get a little bit of a subtle arch to our roof. And then probably my favorite detail from this whole thing is when you place down a lever facing up, and then put a skull out here, give ourselves the side view mirrors to check out our car. Here's how to make your jukebox look more interesting. Since if you were to place down that jukebox, and then outline it with 2 dark oak trapdoors, as well as a sign on the front, all we need to add is just a lever and a hopper on top. We'll give ourselves the perfect design for a phonograph. And it's still a functional jukebox too, which I think when you can make something that both looks good and functions as expected, that's the best of both worlds. Minecraft's got a lot of paintings now, but they're not always interesting to show off, mostly because everyone could show off their paintings exactly the same way. So if you want to change that up, what we could do is place down jack-o'-lanterns like so, and then by adding in our painting of choice, followed by a set of glass panes in front of that, then you'll notice that when we frame it correctly with these stairs out the front, it does obscure a little bit of the painting, but we get this perfectly framed picture painting. And I think what we can still see still looks great. You're probably not thinking of scaffolding for your tables, but I'm gonna show you why you're wrong. Since if we were to place down an armor stand in the floor like so, and then give it a helmet of our choice, I like the turtle shell, then when we place a block inside of the armor stand, whether by pushing it with a piston survival or by using commands, then we add our scaffolding on top, outline the whole thing in trap doors, and you'll notice that that helmet helmet design peeks out perfectly from the top of the scaffolding. And better yet, we can even place our candles and flower pots on top just like a regular table, letting you get creative with how you want to do it. Lodestone just got a whole lot cheaper, and now instead of costing the netherite ingot, we could use this iron ingot design to perfectly integrate it into our floorboards. And while this example shows off doing stripped pale oak logs, I think it also looks equally good if we were to switch this over to smooth stone as well, considering the textures match up really nicely. By stripping the cactus flower off the cactus, then we can take it out of the desert and actually just use it on top of fences to get a whole new stem, which is a huge benefit to the fact that this is one of the first flower items that we can actually place on top of non-solid blocks. And that's why they're taken after the example from Ducky the First of placing this on top of copper rods and then placing that inside of a big pot like so can look great. Just also looks a little bit like a feather duster. By placing down 5 copper trap doors into a pattern like so, with 4 surrounding the center one, then we can flip up the sides and leave that center one as the base for our new milk crate. And we can even go one step further and actually stack these on top of each other just like the real thing. And considering we keep that same trapdoor pattern with any of the stages of oxidization, we got a whole bunch of different colors to use for these milk crates as well. Not gonna look like the red ones, but the copper color by itself does work pretty well. By using a white banner as the base and then adding on the red flower charge, white border, white base, and white chief to this, we end up with this result for an archery target, which as you can see from this example, if you place it against a couple of hay bales, you've got the perfect thing set up for your next target practice range. And you don't have to worry about the potential redstone that gets kicked off by using real target blocks, since the wrong friend could easily rig that up for a deadly trap. I mean, we've done the same in the past. With just 2 spruce trap doors, we're gonna be able to make an entire secret entrance in your base. The way that we do this is we place one of them flush with the floor, and then the other one above it to look like some kind of shelf. That way, all we have to do to get into your secret entrance is go over, flip both of them open, and then climb the ladder down to get into our secret base. Plus, if you mix it with the right blocks up top, it doesn't even look bad, making it even better for a secret edition. By mixing together copper bulbs and tinted glass, we can place a copper bulb in the center here and then surround the rest of our armor stand with tinted glass so that it only illuminates when you press the button to see it. And for me, this totally reminds me of something that you would see inside of a museum, making it a lot more fitting for a gallery instead of just having your items in a chest. And using copper bulbs instead of redstone lamps, that also makes it toggleable easily, as opposed to always having to signal on with a lever for a redstone lamp. With a mix of glowstone and water, we could put together all that we need to have ourselves a giant aether portal fountain. And what I love about this is that it's not only functional as a fountain, but it also gives some kind of memorial to a mistake that all of us made when we first saw the Aether mod. I also just really like the asymmetry of the whole thing. It perfectly sets it up as a gag, but it doesn't look bad, making the Aether more useful than it's ever been in vanilla. By angling in these stairs in the right way, we use the top of the sandstone to make it look like a grave, or more accurately, a tomb. Because let's face it, this is something more fit for a king than something that you would just be buried in the backyard in. But if you wanted to add this to your next pyramid build, I think it works particularly well there. By sneaking a parrot into the wall here, we can tie it up with a lead and then attach that to a fence on the other side to give us a rope that we can then decorate with these candles, giving us not only rope lights, but also the perfect place for another parrot to perch. Though I will say that according to the original poster, it's a lot better suited for Bedrock Edition, where the mob's AI is better to keep it in place than it is on Java. Though if we can use the no AI command, I think you can still make this look pretty good. You're probably not thinking of using trapdoors for walls, but I'm gonna show you why you should. Since if we were to place down a bunch of spruce trapdoors in a row like so, then when we fortify that with a platform to stand on, we can climb up top and actually shoot through these holes in the wall at the oncoming monsters. For me, this feels perfect if you were to get raided, or just if Observer gets a little too close. Sorry, buddy. I'm mixing together a dispenser facing downwards, along with 3 fences, 1 for the legs, 2 for the arms, and then a carved pumpkin on top. We already have the good skeleton for a scarecrow. But the best part is because that dispenser's facing down, we can add a button to the front and fill it up with a water bucket, so then when it's standing in the middle of your crop field scaring away the crows, all you have to do is just press down this button and it'll actually flush all of the crops, harvesting it all. And then you just press the button again and the water retracts, which is pretty good for a farmhand who doesn't have any actual hands. Even though the Happy Gas Summer Drop isn't on all servers, this is a way to make sure it's there in spirit. Since by taking a mix of white blocks and then using stairs for the cheeks facing inwards, then all we need is a slab for the mouth, 2 more for the eyes, and a bunch of buttons for the different dimples on its face. That alone already gives us the basis for the Happy Gas, but what I really like about this build hack is that we could take after the original example and add in glow lichen on top of the different goggles on top, giving it the kind of shine reflection that you'd only usually see in a texture. And hey, we could even connect a boat up with leads to the bottom of it if you wanted to as well, making it about as functional as the regular Happy Gas, just one that's static. By placing down a row of 3 blocks with a stair at the front, we can add a comparator on top for the lights, and then a trapdoor gate at the back for the hind legs, and finish it all off with a set of levers that are on the sides of these, with copper lightning rods facing down, giving us the legs. And then when you step back, you've got yourself a scout robot that's ready to go peruse the battlefield. Or, it would, if it could move. But it's a pretty cool statue nonetheless. And speaking of statues, we can take after this example from Average Tuna to build ourselves our own Moai statue made entirely out of tuff blocks. Now, building one of these might seem a little complex, but we can actually do it step by step. And by laying out the main tuff blocks like so, then we get the staircase-like pattern that gives us all we need to place down the actual detail blocks. Now, for a lot of the face details, all we're really using here is stairs. Have one upside down and one right side up for the nose, 2 more that are facing in for the eyes, and then a set of 6 on the top of his head like so. Now we just need the ears. And for those, using a set of 4 walls on the side of each side of the head, we can finish it off with a chiseled tuff brick in the middle for the lips, and that'll look pretty incredible when you put it all together. A much easier statue to build is if we were to take just 2 armor stands facing into the ground like so, push to each side of the block with a piston, then by placing some other kind of block in there, usually a transparent block like the top part of a slab, then we can add in the top part of a spruce slab and a sponge on top, giving us all that we need for a SpongeBob statue, which is pretty good if you don't have the time to build a whole Krusty Krab. You ever wonder what stone horse armor would look like? Since we placed down a couple of walls for the legs, then we can connect it to the inside by using these dark oak trapdoor gates, and then use 2 smokers, a barrel, and a chiseled stone brick in the inside. We connect the rest of it up with a stone cutter at the back, and then to give the back of the horse, all you need is a stone slab, an iron trapdoor, a dark oak stair facing into the lectern, an upside down grindstone, which you will need to support block to place, and then the stone cutter gives us the mane of the horse, while the trapdoor underneath gives us the mouth. And finally, it's a lever with a fence and a chain to give us the tail at the back. And hey, you can even ride it too, just not very far. By using different kinds of stripped logs in the beach, we can make it look like wet sand the waves have rushed against. And I particularly like using the mix here of the stripped oak logs as well as the stripped birch ones, giving us lighter and darker colors of the wet sand. And the different texture they have from regular sand makes it even look more packed in as well. If you're looking for a sandstone block to use inside of your paths, then you should know that by using the upside down texture of a sandstone stair, that gives us a basic kind of sandstone cobblestone to use in our path, which I think looks really good, especially when the regular sandstone just looks way too smooth at the top. By placing down a pool of water with a couple of soul sand blocks at the bottom, we of course get ourselves a bubble elevator. But then by adding an invisible armor stand using this command, we can then give this beach ball head that we have the link to in the description to make it look as if the beach ball is bouncing off the bubbles. Though I will say that if you want the armor stand to look correct, you might have to modify its NBT. But don't worry, we'll have the command for that down in the description. Really all it's doing is it's making it the small version of an armor stand and having its head angled downward. Minecraft doesn't have a lot of ways to make a waterfall inside of the game, so a simple way to go about doing that is by mixing in armor stands. See, as Mikkel shows off, we can take a page out of the book of someone named Disney Architect to use armor stands in conjunction with the bubble columns to give off a different kind of splashing particle at the surface of the water. So by dispensing armor stands into our magma blocks like so, we can then hide those magma blocks in the water basin with the help of an item frame and a map art to give us the perfect base for a vanilla waterfall. If you're looking to place your stone cutter but your floor is made out of half slabs, then a simple enough way is to place down a smoker first and then our stone cutter on top. Since they both have that same kind of texture on the sides, it actually stacks quite well. I mean, it's a pretty tall stone cutter, but it beats the alternative of having to step on a saw blade. Here's a small furnace, and here's how we build a big furnace. Since by placing down 2 magma blocks and 2 blackstone at the back, then by angling 2 polished stairs in the front as well as 2 cobblestone stairs up top, that gives us a jumbo-sized version of the furnace. And it's even powered on. By placing down a wood log into the center of the floor, we can then add on a glass block on top with ladders on each side of its face, and then a rail on top to give ourselves what looks like an empty cage for animals. Though just be careful, because unfortunately you can't place rails on top of glass in Bedrock. By placing an invisible item frame at the bottom of the fence like so, we can connect that up with a lever and then place a skull on the inside of that item frame to make it so that our levers and our fence connect perfectly at the wall, giving us a really cool detail for a lamp. And again, the command to get that invisible item frame will be in the description below. A lot of people lately are talking about mixing redstone with building and calling it buildstone. And I think this is a really cool way of doing that, since what we're doing is we're using trapdoors at the back of this that get activated on a regular interval from the redstone to then change the state of our walls, since every time that they connect to the wall, it actually turns into a column as opposed to a flush wall. And then by having that go along in a row, that'll give us this rippling wall effect, perfect for some kind of spooky maze. Oh, we don't have dirt slabs in Minecraft. Granite slabs can actually do the trick quite well. And then by mixing that next to rooted dirt, I actually think it blends even better with our coarse dirt and regular dirt variants. With the new pale wood block, we can place down a whole bunch of that stripped interior log to give ourselves what looks like a padded cell, which is great for any kind of solitary confinement challenge you're trying to do. I mean, if it worked for Mr. Beast, I guess it works for the rest of us. Making your staircase look unique's tough, so here's a good example of one. By using using a mix of oak trapdoors, oak slabs, and then lecterns, we not only have a unique looking staircase, but it's also going to be one that we can easily walk up. Man, I think the original post's point about using these as beach stairs is a great idea. And that's not the only unique staircase that we've got, since by starting first with a row of logs going like so, then we connect it all up using regular rails, and then place trapdoors on top of each one of those rails. That doesn't disrupt the rails, but instead it gives us this great looking connected design for our staircase. It's just gonna have to be one that you climb up one step at a time, but it does look cool. Here's something you can add to your next dig site. Since by facing a copper lightning rod off the ground like so, then by using suspicious sand or suspicious gravel, it really does look like something stuck in the ground. And we don't have to just settle for that, since by using a debug stick in Java, we can also change the block state of it to be on level 3, making it really look as if the ground's disturbed by whatever's inside. But considering we can't just silk touch and pick up those blocks, if you wanted something that you could do in survival, then the option could be end stone in the sand like so, or dead coral blocks mixed into the gravel, which there, I think that looks really good. Redstone dust in the ground by itself already looks suspicious, and redstone ore is no different, since by just placing down redstone ore and then a player head on top, you can angle it just right and really make it look like an unfortunate accident happened. And what I love about this is that it's such a simple build hack, but it's not one I've seen before, making it even better to place in your world. Once you've built yourself a mob statue like so, then we can take that creeper face and add these copper bulbs to the back of it, and then power it on with buttons on the front, giving us the perfect crazy eyes to make your creeper look insane, which considering it's a creeper, I think that makes sense. By placing your dripstone spikes underneath copper grates, then when we place out our mud on top to dry it out, we can fill up the water inside of the copper grates to make it look as if the water's draining out of the block as it's going, letting you not only have something that's functional, but it also looks pretty good too. Adding a gradient to a banner is really easy inside of the loom, and then by using that dye of your choice, we can take that gradient banner, we can place it next to our light sources to make it look as if light is reflecting off the fabric. Or if you wanted to, you could even just place two of these with inverted patterns facing off of each other, and it basically makes it look as if there's a light implied in the center of it. Pretty good when you don't have vibrant visuals yet. You're probably not thinking of using signs to make a circle, but as use of Nate isn't okay shows off, it's actually more than okay as a solution to get ourselves a perfect circle in the game. Though the way we do this at this scale is pretty complex. And if you're pausing and building this along with me, but you're wondering why yours doesn't quite look the same, then worth noting is that you are gonna have to go back with levers to the back of this wall and power on the different states of iron trapdoors to make them go and flip up, since we can't just place them vertically easily like so. But using those together with our diorite walls, we can get just the right amount of slope to make our circle look perfect. By using the item display commands, we're able to summon in item displays that look like player heads in specific ways, and then by teleporting those into the right position, we can actually make it look as if we have different parts of the hat texture growing off of our blocks. And as observers showing off of this example using moss, I think it looks really cool. And if you want the commands, we leave all of them down in the description, of course. My favorite probably is the glass block. But if you're wondering why you're getting the Z fighting on the texture that makes it look confusing, usually what that means is we just need to change the scale a little bit, since if it's too close, the game doesn't know which texture to show, and it just makes it all clash. By angling in some rails down a staircase into our flower box, we can then drop down some hopper mine carts and finish it off entirely with some flower pots to give ourselves a great looking flower design to show off on your base. But if you're building this, just know that it's really annoying how the rails can connect to each other when you're placing this in a row. I'd recommend just doing one at a time. Here's how to use a boat for a build hack. Since if we were to summon in a boat that has an invisible mob inside of it, then that boat can't get nudged around by anything else. And the reason that's important is that if we place a bunch of these boats together with the summon command, we can actually use their frame to give a perfect trim to our base. And here's what it would look like if we didn't have the invisible bats inside of the boat. Yeah, apparently bats are a lot more helpful than they've ever been before. Adding item frames to the back of our doors like so, we can then fill out their texture using map art, and then look at the back of the texture to see that it looks different whether you're using a regular item frame for an unlit light, or using a glowing item frame to make it look like the lights are on inside of the house. Or we could put our item frames to use like so, since by placing down frog spawn inside of this one, it'll look like the olives on a pizza, or by using leaf litter in this example, it looks a lot more like the bubbling parts of mozzarella that you get on a cheese pizza, just maybe a little overcooked. By summoning in a no AI goat to the front of this building, then we can position it just right to give ourselves a goat head trophy on our wall. But don't worry, the goat's completely fine with it. You can even hear it sometimes too, making him the most well-behaved goat that we've ever seen in Minecraft. As we showed off in our 50 ways to use Happy Ghast video, you can use the harness texture on a Happy Ghast for quite a lot of interior decorating. And in this example, I think it looks particularly well as a curtain to place inside of our build. But the way that we get it to behave is pretty tough. And usually you just use a no AI command to make it work a little better. And here I'm standing in between these two blocks so that I can line myself up perfectly so that it places in the middle of the block. Since if I was just using a regular spawn egg, it places in kind of a weird orientation. And we need it just right to work as either our couch or the curtain that we're gonna place out the back. And then you can use the dinner bone variations of the name tag to give that texture on the floor like so, or facing upwards. Really just whatever suits your build. In the past, we've shown off how to build speakers using structure blocks, which is great, but it's not possible in survival. Now the new cheaper lodestones are just gonna cost an iron ingot and some stone to place down each one of these new speaker systems. And then framing it with some pale oak trapdoors along the side, we can connect it all up with string at the back to give ourselves our perfect sound system for a DJ, which is the perfect way to listen to the new Gast music disc.
And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?